Section 8 of The Adventures of Danny Meadow Mouse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Adventures of Danny Meadow Mouse by Thornton W. Burgess. Chapter 23. Reddy Fox Grows Curious. Danny Meadow Mouse had sat perfectly still for a long time inside the old tomato can in which he had found a refuge from Redtail the hawk. He didn't dare so much as he put his head out for a look around, lest Redtail should be circling around ready to pounce on him. "If I stay here long enough, he'll get tired and go away if he hasn't already," thought Danny. "This has been a very exciting morning so far, and I find that I'm a little tired. I may as well take a nap while I'm here, waiting to make sure that the way is clear." And with that, Danny curled up in the old tomato can. But it wasn't meant that Danny should have that nap. He had closed his eyes, but his ears were still open, and presently he heard soft footsteps drawing near. His eyes flew open, and he forgot all about his sleep, you may be sure, for those footsteps sounded familiar. They sounded to Danny very, very much like the footsteps of, whom do you think? Why, Reddy Fox. Danny's heart began to beat faster as he listened. Could it be? He didn't dare to peep out. Presently a little whiff of scent blew into the old tomato can. Then Danny knew. It was Reddy Fox. "Oh dear, I hope he doesn't find out that I'm in here," thought Danny. "I wonder what under the sun has brought him up here just now." If the truth were to be known, it was curiosity that had brought Reddy up here. Reddy had been hunting for his breakfast some distance away on the Green Meadows when Redtail the hawk had tried so hard to catch Danny Meadow Mouse. Reddy's sharp eyes had seen Redtail the minute he left the tree in pursuit of Danny, and he had known by the way Redtail flew that he saw something he wanted to catch. He had watched Redtail swoop down and heard his scream of rage when he missed Danny because Danny had dodged into the old tomato can. He had seen Redtail strike and strike again at something on the ground, and finally fly off in disgust with empty claws. "Now, I wonder what it was that Redtail was after and why he didn't get it," thought Reddy. He acted terribly put out and disappointed. "I believe I'll go over there and find out." Off he started at a smart trot toward the patch of short grass where he had seen Redtail the hawk striking at something on the ground. As he drew near, he crept very softly until he reached the very edge of the open tomato patch. There he stopped and looked sharply all over it. There was nothing to be seen but an old tomato can. Reddy had seen it many times before. "Now, what under the sun could Redtail have been after here?" thought Reddy. "The grass isn't long enough for a grasshopper to hide in, and yet Redtail didn't get what he was after. It's very queer. It certainly is very queer." He trotted out and began to run back and forth with his nose to the ground, hoping that his nose would tell him and his eyes couldn't. Back and forth he ran, and suddenly he stopped. "Ha!" exclaimed Reddy. He had found scent left by Danny Meadow Mouse when he ran across towards the old tomato can. Right up to the old tomato can Reddy's nose led him. He hopped over the old can, but on the other side he could find no scent of Danny Meadow Mouse. In a flash he understood, and a gleam of satisfaction shone in his yellow eyes as he turned back to the old can. He knew that Danny must be hiding in there. "I've got you this time," he snarled as he sniffed at the open end of the can. Chapter 24. Reddy Fox Loses His Temper. Reddy Fox had caught Danny Meadow Mouse, and yet he hadn't caught him. He had found Danny hiding in the old tomato can, and it didn't enter Reddy's head that he couldn't get Danny out when he wanted to. He was in no hurry. He had had a pretty good breakfast of grasshoppers, and so he thought he would torment Danny a while before gobbling him up. He lay down so that he could peep in at the open end of the old can and see Danny trying to make himself as small as possible at the other end. Reddy grinned until he showed all of his long teeth. Reddy always is a bully, especially when his victim is a great deal smaller and weaker than himself. "I've got you this time, Mr. Smarty, haven't I?" taunted Reddy. Danny didn't say anything. "You think you've been very clever because you have fooled me 2 or 3 times, don't you? Well, this time I've got you where your tricks won't work," continued Reddy. "And so what are you going to do about it?" Danny didn't answer. The fact is, he was too afraid to answer. Besides, he didn't know what he could do, so he kept still, but his bright eyes never once left Reddy's cruel face. For all his fright, Danny was doing some hard thinking. He had been in tiny places before, and had never learned to give up hope. Something might happen to frighten Reddy away. Anyways, Reddy had to get him out of that old can before he could admit that he was really caught. For a long time, Reddy lay there licking his chops, saying all the things he could to think of poor, frightening Danny Meadow Mouse. At last, he grew tired of this and made up his mind that it was the time to end it and Danny Meadow Mouse at the same time. He thrust his sharp nose in at the opening of the old can, but the opening was too small for him to get more than his nose in, and he only scratched it on the sharp edges with so much as touching Danny. "I'll pull you out," said Reddy, and thrust in one black paw. Danny promptly bit it so hard that Reddy yelped with pain and pulled it out in a hurry. Presently he tried again with the other paw. Then he bit this one harder still, and Reddy danced with pain and anger. Then he lost his temper completely, a very foolish thing to do, as it always is. He hit the old can, and away it rolled with Danny Meadow Mouse inside. This seemed to make Reddy angrier than ever. He sprang after it and hit it again. Then he batted it first this way and then that way, growing angrier and angrier. And all the time, Danny Meadow Mouse managed to keep inside, although he got a terrible shaking up. Back and forth across the patch of short grass Reddy rocked the old can, and he was in such a rage that he didn't notice where he was knocking it to. Finally, he sent it spinning into the long grass on the far side of the open patch, close to one of Danny's private little paths. Like a flash, Danny was out and scurrying along the little path. He dodged into another and presently into a third, which brought him to a tangle of barbed wire left there by Farmer Brown when he had built a new fence. Under this, he was safe. "Phew!" exclaimed Danny, breathing very hard. "That was the narrowest escape yet, but I guess I'll get that special grass seed I started out for after all." And he did. Well, to this day, Reddy Fox wonders how Danny got out of that old tomato can without his knowing it. And so, you see what temper does for those who give in rein. It cheats them of the very thing they seek so hard to gain. Danny has had many more adventures, but there isn't room to tell about here. Besides, Grandfather Frog is anxious that you should hear about the queer things that have happened to him. They are told in the next book. End of Section 8. End of The Adventures of Danny Meadow Mouse by Thornton W. Burgess.